This is Tell Me a Story on the road, headed to Memphis, Tennessee. We're here to witness and document the Miraj Academy graduation, and we couldn't pass up the phenomenal opportunity to gather Shaykh Hamzah Abdul-Malik, Imam Zaid Shakir, and Dr. Sherman Jackson all on one small hotel couch for Tell Me a Story.
I don't know what kind of party this is. What kind of stories you trying to tell here? Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Welcome to Tell Me a Story. Today I have the honor of interviewing my mentor, Dr. Sherman Jackson, my mentor, Imam Zaid Shakir, and my Habib, Shaykh Hamzah Abdul-Malik. And this is Tell Me a Story. The genesis of this podcast was that I would sit down at the kitchen table for dinner, and my children would often say to me, "Dad, tell me a story." And sometimes I would tell them, sometimes I wouldn't. But it reminded me of the centrality of stories to our experience, and perhaps no greater evidence is relevant than the fact that the Quran is called Ahsan al-Qasas, the best of stories. So today, I get to lead with Hamzah, and I get to say, Hamzah, tell me a story.
Alhamdulillah, bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Man, we don't share so many stories.
A lot of kiosk talks. Going from us talking for hours.
Yeah, we be up to 1, 2 in the morning talking, giving stories. So, alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. When I studied in Morocco. I went to Morocco at 12 years old to study Quran, to complete my memorization. And after I completed my memorization, alhamdulillah, one time when I was back in the States, in New Haven, Connecticut, where Imam Zaid Shakir had established his community there, we would go after Jummah, I would walk to the corner store. It was like a tradition for like the teenagers. So we'd go to the corner store, get some snacks. And on the way back, this particular time, I was on vacation from overseas. And on the way back, Mansour.
Somebody?
No, Mansour from Connecticut. I'm walking back, and he was saying, he was having like going through a rough patch. And he was asking me, how is it overseas? At the time, I started going to Syria. And he said, "How is it overseas?" I was like, "It's good. It's an acquired taste. You gotta learn the ropes. It can be an acquired taste for some. And he said he was like, I really like what you're doing. I wanna learn Quran too. I missed the opportunity when we were studying in New Haven before I went overseas, and then when I went overseas, he missed that opportunity. So he said, man, you think I can make it over there? And I just had to give him my honest answer. So I was like, I don't think you're going to make it overseas. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think. But, and I had to be like 14, 15 years old at the time. And that didn't really settle well with me. You know what I'm saying? I felt like I kind of discouraged him from a trajectory that could have completely changed his life. But the reason why I had said that is because I had seen so many examples of people from, the first example, one of the first people who had gone overseas went to Egypt. He's from New Haven, and he had an extremely bad experience, still hasn't recovered since then. Extremely bad. About as bad as it can get. Yeah, in Egypt. Went to prison, got tortured and everything. I don't know how much you want to, I don't know what this is. I don't know what kind of party this is, what kind of stories you trying to tell here. But that was a predecessor, one of the predecessors to us going overseas. But yeah, this was when was that? When did he go? This had to be 95, maybe 95, 95, 96. So I had known that. I wasn't overseas when that happened, but I had known that, and I had been overseas long enough to, you kind of figure like you have to be built a certain type of way. So on one hand, I didn't feel that bad for telling him that, but at the same time, I felt like that wasn't a sufficient answer to give. So fast forward. I always wanted to set up opportunities for young people like myself, and Basim Rahimahullah, who went overseas, Ashir went overseas. They actually took the chance, went overseas, and benefited. Most people couldn't due to lack of finances or just circumstances. I always wanted to set up something in Morocco, specifically because I wanted that connection with Quran. I wanted to give them opportunity to get that connection with Quran. But as I was telling the audience yesterday, when I was sitting with yourself and Dr. Jackson in Cairo, we were chopping it up as usual, and we had been talking about law school, things we're going to do after Azhar, and I'm all kind of, have positive thinking about about law school, and I think I remember.
Vision sitting on the screen.
Right.
Sizing the role.
Right. And I remember, I think Imam Zaid, when I was visiting California, I was telling you about international law. I had an international law book. We were sitting, and you were like, "Oh, okay." You had given me a much more positive answer when I was sitting.
I dropped my law school dream the day before the LSATs.
Really?
I was at American University in Washington, getting ready to take the LSATs, and then I got in all this revolution. I said, man, I ain't learning this kafir law. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَحْكُمْ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْكَافِرُونَ ظَالِمُونَ فَاسِقُونَ. Forget it. The day before the LSATs.
So what led you to pursuing the ulum Islamiyya, Islamic knowledge?
I think necessity. We work in a community, and your life is going in a certain direction. You say, man, I need to try to learn this thing properly, because if it's going to be like this, then you have to take it a bit more seriously than just the autodidactic, grabbing all these books and the Pakistani, what is it, something Ashraf, you cutting the trim off so you can access the contents, and the Maududi books and the milestones and just every this, and then then you get something more substantial, the Hodgkin, Marshall Hodgkin Islamic History, 3 volumes, and so, but at a certain point it's like, this got to get more systematic and focused. So that was pretty much it.
Dr. Jackson, I recall you telling me that you were a machinist.
No, I was an industrial mechanic.
An industrial mechanic. And that you really didn't see yourself
Coming out of the Air Force.
Well, no.
Working in avionics. And
No. Actually, I was an industrial mechanic.
I was in the Air Force.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
In the Air Force?
Yeah, I was in the Air Force. Yeah. But this is how it went. So believe it or not, and in fact, it's interesting, man, because when you grow up in certain ways, that way is just normal. And on some level, you think the whole world grows up like that. And you think your experience is pretty typical of, just people in general. And I remember when I first got to the University of Texas, that was actually my first job in the academy. A friend of mine who went on to become the president of the University of Oklahoma, I think it was. Anyway, we became friends there. And he said something to me. He said, well, I could probably count in a phone booth the number of people who went to your high school and ended up going to college. Now, and that was because my high school was a vocational high school. It was a high school that you went to learn trades, all right? And they had a program where at the end of your first semester of 12th grade, if you had all passing grades, they would hook you up with a potential employer, and if the employer was impressed with you and they hired you, you could leave school, go to work, and your grades from your first semester, right, would carry over to your next semester, and then you'd graduate in June, right? So my major in high school was instrumentation. So I went on to work for Westinghouse, and I started out just cleaning up, parts for motors and stuff like that. And then I graduated to a mechanic status. So I was I put together motors for Amtrak and all that kind of thing. But then, I don't know, man. I'd come in the morning and, you say good morning, man, and nobody say anything. And then you come in and you say something like, how the hell are you, SOBs, or something like that, and everybody's, right, I just
Trying to learn how to talk to us.
yeah, right, and so it's like, I just felt like 5 billion brain cells just dying a day, man. So I decided then that that's when I decided to go in the Air Force, and at that time I thought it was a safe bet because if you left a job to go into the military, as long as you got an honorable discharge, your job was legally obligated to give you your job back. So I left Westinghouse, and then I went into the Air Force. And then when I got out of the Air Force, because I only did 2 years in the Air Force, shortly after I got out of the Air Force, I became a Muslim. I embraced Islam. And I think that, so I was an industrial mechanic then. So I went back to work for Westinghouse. And then, of course, I was a Muslim by that time. And at that time, and it had something to do with the people who were, running the masjid in which I took Shahada. This was the Islamic Center of Philadelphia. And Sheikh Ali Ahmed, who wonderfully, I was able to reconnect with him last year, 2 years ago or so in Mecca. Yeah, right. Yes. He's good, man. He's good, man. But, he really promoted Islam, as sort of a commitment to high-mindedness, and it was excellence, and striving, to really be a better, well-rounded human being. So I decided then that I was going to go to college. But when I first started to go to college, I was an accounting major. But I think the dynamic within the community, and you're talking about why,
Chance of some good accounting, man.
Yeah, no, I would have been a horrible accountant, man. That's the way that stuff went, man. Those reversing entries, man, drove me crazy. But anyway,
He'd be crunching numbers and grab a book.
But I think, quite frankly, part of what, I'm always a little leery of telling these stories because it was so long ago. Sometimes you get a year mixed up here or there, a sequence mixed up. But this was the general story. So I went to college. I was at Temple University. But then within the masjid, within the Muslim community, I think what really drove me to want to pursue, religious knowledge was that you just got pulled in 1,000 different directions, by members of the community, man. And it was like, man, I'm going to have to learn this thing for myself, or they're going to drive me out of here. So I wanted to learn Arabic, and I, at that time, formally studying Arabic, they had an arrangement between Temple University and the University of Pennsylvania, where if you enrolled in Temple, you could go to Penn to study Arabic. And that's where I started.
American in Georgetown. I was at American. They didn't have Arabic. They had an arrangement with Georgetown.
Right.
You could go there and do Arabic.
Right.
2 years of Arabic at Georgetown.
Right. So that's when I started going to the University of Pennsylvania to study Arabic. And then there, though, they had an actual, what they called it back then, Oriental Studies, but they had an Islamic Studies program as well. So that's when I transferred to the University of Pennsylvania and started studying there. And then, 2 years into that, I went overseas.
SubhanAllah. You know, Hamza and I.
That was 1982, but that wasn't 97. That was 1982.
1982. That's the year I was born.
So that was a very that was a very different Cairo from the one you met when you went over there.
Yeah, I'm sure. You know, you told me stories about
A
that.
quick story.
That's the purpose of the
Tell me a
platform.
story, right? T-Mass.
Allah Akbar.
So, this is in Islamic studies, but I got serious about college. Like, I came into college, Central Connecticut State. No study habits.
Right.
Because you were an athlete in high school.
Yeah. I didn't know what homework was.
So
I would get a...
hard to believe.
Seriously, anyway. So I went to college. I got hurt, so I couldn't play football the first semester. Only class, midterms came, I was like, it's like high school. I'll read the book the night before. I pick up the book, it's like, you gotta read from page 1 to page 200. And that's just one class. I'm like, Houston, we got a problem. I flunked everything except weightlifting. and so they advised me just withdraw so you won't get an F. I withdrew. I got a job as a janitor at Southington, Connecticut Hospital. And I'm mopping the floor in the lab. And the lab techs didn't know how to do this particular slide. But I had a laboratory techniques class in high school. And I showed them how to do the slide. I'm like, they should be the janitor. I should be the lab tech. I quit the next day. I put the mop down, that's it. And then I re-enrolled. I got serious about it. And I became a good student after that.
It's amazing, man. You know, because
I wasn't a good student in high school either.
What?
No.
If you could get an A without homework, I got an A.
I hesitate to tell you what my first period class was.
Don't tell me that.
No, I won't tell you. I won't tell you.
But it's hard. It's so hard to believe that.
Don't tell him. Tell me. Whisper, man. What was it?
No, I feel like, you know, of course, in the Islamic tradition, there's something called tabaqat literature that's really like collections of biographical kind of vignettes, usually of scholars or the Ahlullah, the people of Allah. And when we think about, you know, the people that have been instrumental in the Islamic, I would say, intellectual culture of the U.S., we wouldn't think that their backgrounds were like that.
My mother went to high school in Philly. I went to Overbrook.
I went to Dobbins Tech,
She went to Overbrook.
Yeah.
She never got nothing but A.
And there was a reason I went to Dobbins. I didn't go to a regular high school.
SubhanAllah.
Yeah. My father made me go
What would
there.
you say, Hamza, has been the greatest benefit that you found in pursuing, you know, Islamic knowledge?
Being in close proximity to people who were dedicated to perfecting their character.
Allah.
Just being in proximity to people like that. And the only cost of admission was humility.
But Imam Zaid, you were saying that when you were 15, you began a story. When you were 15.
When I was 15, I decided, like, I'm not going to do this for the rest of my life. You know, chase the girls, you know, just play sports. And, like, I was saying that there has to be something higher to life. There has to be a higher purpose. And so, aside from those struggles and challenges academically, there were no real challenges. Everything was easy except no study habits and no homework. I'm not doing homework. But it wasn't challenging at all. Even math, when I had to do it, I did it. When I didn't have to do it, I can't do math. When I had to do it, graduation requirement, A. But anyway, so there has to be something higher. And I started I hurt my shoulder. 5th game, my senior year, football. And, you know, I was out for several games, and that's when I really started thinking about life more deeply.
That's
Because I was just in that cycle. It was just work out, go to practice, work out, hang out with your friends who doing the same thing. Because you have this group, my brothers all doing the same thing. We made a gym in our basement, cracked the tiles in the projects with the iron barbell weights. So, but is this it? Like, what comes after all this? There has to be a higher purpose. That kind of directed me towards Islam. But Islam was the last thing I looked at, is the Buddhism and
That's that. Yeah, that because it was a search. Yeah, it was a search.
Similar, you have a similar experience of
Yeah.
there's a search in Islam, kind of satiated that appetite.
No, but I think I don't regret Islam being last, because everything prepared me for Islam and allowed me to appreciate Islam. I think if Islam was first, maybe okay, let's see something else. But it was like I tried everything else. This is it. So I don't even need to search anymore.
Last train home.
Khitamuhu misk.
Allahu Akbar.
Alhamdulillah.
Dr. Jackson, I wanted to ask you, often when we think about scholarship, we talk about the benefits. We talk about the accolades
I know
and the
where this is going.
recognition. And what about cost?
It's a huge cost.
What have you been able to identify any of the cost of pursuing the life of the mind?
I'm not sure I would call it, look, the pursuit of knowledge, I think whether you're in the East or the West, it's an institutionalized entity. I mean, you pursue knowledge through institutions, and those institutions have their rules and they have their requirements. And along with those requirements comes a lot of sacrifice. And so, so for example, let's take the field of Islamic studies in the American Academy. All right, for my PhD in the PhD program that I was in, all right, of course you had to know Arabic. Then you had to have another Middle Eastern language. Now, the whole reason I get into this thing, all right, is because I want to enhance my understanding of Islam. But yet I have to have another Middle Eastern language. I have to study Persian. Then you have to have a reading knowledge of French, a reading knowledge of German, all right? And that's all so that you can get your degree. And so there are all kinds of responsibilities that come along with the pursuit of what you want to pursue that have very little or are tangentially related to the reason that you want to pursue that. So that's why I say I'm not sure I would describe it just as a pursuit. A pursuit of the life of the mind, because you don't do that sort of as a freelance activity. You do that in an institutionalized way, and there are all kinds of other obligations that go along with that. All right, and so it takes a lot of time.
Yeah,
it takes a lot of.
That's what we used to think of Shu'un al-Talaba.
A lot of effort, and if you're married, you're going to take time away from your family. You're going to take time away from your wife. You're going to take time away from your children. You take time away from your friends. You take time away from your parents. And that's part of the sacrifice you make, and you can lie to yourself about it. But if you're doing reasonably well, all right, 8 times out of 10, if not 9, you're taking time from somebody else. So yeah, I can identify the amount of time I took away from my family, my wife, my children, and that was part of the sacrifice.
Imam Zaid, same thing for you. I mean, I sometimes would sit and just marvel at your travel schedule. I would sometimes look at the flyers and think, how is he here? How is he there? How did you do it? And looking back on it, do you feel that it was all worth it? I mean, building institutions, helping communities to raise funds for various institutions, various initiatives, various efforts, writing, teaching.
But let me interject, because it sounds like you're building off the question that you asked me. Because to me, it's not a matter of do you think that it was worth it? I'm not sure that that's the exact question that comes out of all this. Was an alternative to that? I'm not sure there was. So it's not like, okay, do I choose to take time from my family or not? I mean, if you're going to be successful in this pursuit, it has to come from somewhere, or get out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what Allah decreed. Like, you play the hand Allah deals you. So a lot of times it's not necessarily I want to do this or I don't want to do this. It's just circumstances, the decree of Allah. We're using the word circumstances conspire, and you find yourself looking at the schedule, and it's like, Bismillah,
La ilaha illallah.
and you just handle it. And so I never really thought about costs, benefits. I didn't approach it in a utilitarian fashion. It was just, this is a phase, and try to give it its full right. And inshallah, if you live long enough, it was preceded by a phase and phases that didn't involve that. And hopefully it'll be followed by phases that don't involve that involve something else. Kun haythu aqamak Allah, or qum haythu aqamak Allah. Be where Allah place you. Try to give it its full right, and keep it moving.
You talk about phases that follow. I've been really pleased with seeing you in the last few years. Every time I see you, you're talking about your grandchildren. Talking about their youth football and how it is to be close to them and being back in Connecticut, and that seems like it's been something that you were longing for. But I could be.
Well, if all your adult life you're away from family, you're missing the graduations, the kids growing up, the relatives, the teenagers struggling with the problems. You're not there. You're trying to solve everyone's problems, except those closest to you. Then at a certain point, you realize this is the last chance, man. This is the last crew. And so it's like, if you don't get this one, that's it. You missed it altogether.
Allah.
So I said, hey, look, I'm getting up. So at a certain point, I think, Shaykh Hamzah said something I'll never forget. He said that, I think it's referenced his father, the cemetery is filled with indispensable people. And I think some people think they're so integral to a certain thing that if they're not doing it, it won't get done, Things tend to move on without you. You know what I'm saying? You look back, okay, now, right?
Yeah, but I think though, I think though, in the case of most of us, however, what you have to add is the zeal of the convert, man.
Yeah, that too.
We were all converts, man. And so the zeal of the convert, man.
Darbun min al-junub.
Yeah, yes.
Don't come insanity. Yeah. So it's the last chance. You really get a part of that. And so that's the promising scholar athletes, and but they need guidance. They need help. A lot of us who had to negotiate a lot of that stuff, like figuring it out from A to Z. I had to figure out how to write a term paper. There's no one I'm no study habits, and you're coming out and you're in college, this paper is due. Like footnotes and all that. What's a footnote? And you have to basically teach yourself.
Yes. Yeah, I mean,
and
I hope you caught the fact that I said I went to a vocational high school. All right, so this is not where you get all this training in philosophy and the liberal arts. And all these kinds of things. So by the time I got really into college, a lot of it. Well, I knew what my educational deficiencies were, and I knew I had to make up for a lot of them. And so, I was one of them guys, man.
You had to make
right that I had to make up for. See, so I read the footnote. Go try to get the book or the article or the footnote, and I was a very slow reader, so that was more time. So there was a lot to make up, but alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, we were together this weekend on the occasion of Mi'raj Institute graduating 3, correct? 3 hufaz, young men that had completed the memorization of the Holy Quran. Barakallahu fihim. May Allah bless them. And alhamdulillah, I interface with hufaz often, and I interface with kutabs, schools where they study Quran often. I was a student at one such madrasa. But what made the gathering at Mi'raj unique was that the founding director of the school is African American. Most of the speakers were African American, and the Huffaz themselves, African American. I wanted to ask, did your identity, and I know this is an overused term, some people are just tired of hearing identity, but it does have relevance. Studying Islam as black men from America in the majority Muslim world, did that color your experience at all? Or was it incidental to your experience?
I'm not sure I understand the question. I don't know. If somebody else understands it, then...
No, in the sense of, do you think that
What's what it?
being African American
Okay.
at that time, because I felt like by the time we were there, there was a precedent. I didn't feel that anomalous. I didn't feel, there was some, I guess I would say, interesting ways. Like, remember I called you the hadith in Bukhari. I said, جواز النظر إلى أشباه إلى الأحباش ومن أشبههم. The permissibility of looking at Ethiopians and those who look like them. I said, yo, Hamzah, man, what are they talking about? Huh? What does this mean? We had those kinds of conversations, but it wasn't like the way I hear some of our predecessors describe.
I never had that studying Islam overseas. I had it in undergraduate and graduate school and college at American University in Rutgers. There was a strong sense of I have to represent for all them brothers back there who didn't have a chance. I got to do this for them. This is bigger than me. I seriously had that. But Islam, no, I never had it in Islam. That it was just, I'm here like all these other guys from Dagestan and Shishan and, Juz al-Qamar. And I'm just one of these guys trying to handle whatever they're throwing at you.
I mean, it depends on what you mean by the question. I mean, if your question is, did you experience color prejudice in the Muslim world? My answer would be yes. At the same time, it's not the same social political context. It's not the same social political history. They don't have a history of Jim Crow, et cetera, et cetera. So it plays out a bit differently.
A segregated graveyard.
Right. So it plays out a bit differently. And but the idea of there being color prejudice that was there. The other thing is that you experience what we would certainly consider to be incidents of racism, but it's just not the same as it is here because you don't have the same sort of supporting cast that you have here. But you do recognize it for what it is, and at the same time, for me, when I was studying overseas, it always occurred to me that I always almost had to study like this.
That's what I was.
Because I knew that to just take what I'm studying now, and try to just, superimpose it, but it ain't gonna work. This has got to be translated into a whole different reality, a reality where, the history, the circumstances, the aspirations of Black Americans has not been a part of, the curriculum that you're studying overseas. So yeah, I mean that's always been a part of it.
La ilaha illallah.
I mean, if that's what your question.
That's what I was referring to. Yeah, Imam Zaid, you have a number of notable terms of phrase that we sometimes recall fondly. But I remember I was asking you once about retirement. I said, when are you gonna retire? And you said, retire is just, they retire you. So you
put new treads
on you so you can go some more. But in a slightly different direction. But there's no retirement other than retire you. But thinking about just all the work that you've done, and I've been a Muslim for 26 years, and you've been my teacher for the entire quarter century, watching videos and tapes, and the first time I ever boarded a plane, me and Rami Nashashibi, came to the Manor Conference in Philly, and then we rolled up to New Haven, and you were just getting back from Syria. And
I didn't know that.
Years ago.
Cross paths back then.
Yeah, subhanallah. So thinking about, I don't want to, I'm wary of using the word legacy because you're not done. That's why I said you're just retired in that Imam Zaid Shakir, sense. But thinking about, your legacy, if you could kind of think about what you've been doing for the last 30 years, how would you like that legacy to be remembered?
I'll give you the Sufi answer. Dabbir Allah to dabbir. Plan not to plan. Don't plan for a legacy. Just keep trying to do something that's going to benefit your soul and benefit people till you can't do it anymore. And then that's up to Allah. Allah determines your legacy, not you. And I think if people try to take steps that are going to carve a certain legacy, they're going to be extremely disappointed with the outcome.
But what do you mean by legacy? You mean how I want my work to be seen, or
how you want your work to be seen?
How I want to be seen, how I want my work to be seen, or what impact I want my work to have?
I was going to ask you, you also, man, turn a phrase. We were speaking together once, and you said, I'm getting to the point that it's not just about productivity, but about reproductivity. Mm-hmm. Right? What
Dr. Jackson got words, man. Man, you could have chose something that's a bit more avant-garde. Man, I think it's the Abdul Hakim, man. Between the Quick, the Jackson, the Murad, man, you need a dictionary. With these brothers, you gotta start. Man, I think I'm gonna change my name to Abdul Hakim, man, so I can write a book that nobody can read.
But I think, thinking about legacy, man. Quite frankly, what I really hope, I think that Islam in America is still a work in progress, and quite frankly, I think that there have been phases in that history where we didn't quite get it right. And I don't mean in any kind of moral sense. I mean, everybody is trying to examine the social, political, social context that you're in, and they're reacting, with the best that they have. Right. And then, we've had a very complicated situation to sort of accommodate. All right. We have our own background, and then we have a whole population of Muslims coming from the Muslim world, various countries, various histories, various political realities, etc. We've had the question of, authenticity, who is really an authentic Muslim, and having to try to negotiate all that. So we've had to try to accommodate all that at one time. We've not always got it right. What I hope is that, I will have contributed to a clearer understanding, I want to say accurate, but that could be seen from, different angles. So I don't want to be overly doctrinaire about it. But one of the things I think we did not get right is we did not really take seriously the fact that we have to have 2 feet on the ground where we are. If we're going to do Islam in America, we have to have 2 feet on the ground in America. We cannot be in America doing Islam, but imagining Islam as it's supposed to be practiced, or as it is practiced someplace else. And so I hope that, my work will contribute to the firm planting of both feet of Muslims on the ground in America, not in an assimilationist vein, but in a vein of starting where you are, building where you are, for where you are.
Yeah, I think, but you could call that just your contribution to the struggle. I think legacy can be interpreted if that's the case. I think all of us want to contribute something that's going to help to advance the project, if you will. Just keep it moving, greater clarity. a wider appeal. I think we've what Dr. Jackson's, I think you're referring to, Islam was very appealing at one point. And then that appeal kind of
In the Black
waned.
American community, yeah.
In the Black American community, and then that for a number of reasons that appeal began to wane because I don't think we kept it as appealing as it could have been. But I think there were a lot of serious challenges that we didn't adequately account for.
Right.
And you can name one. I think one is just the reality of gentrification. It's easy when you have a population density like you have in Memphis. It's easy to root yourself in the community, no, regardless of what degree you're integrated into the community. You know, people see you because there's a critical mass. There's brothers and sisters walking down the street, sisters with hijabs on, you know, brothers with kufis on. Even if they're not really thoroughly integrated into the life of community, they're visible. And people know those are Muslims. And if they're on their deen, they're not robbing people, they're not stealing stuff, they minding their business. Or if you're more thoroughly integrated in the community. But I think gentrification now, people are scattered. And you don't have that critical mass. You know, some people are in this suburb that they got redlined into. Some people in that suburb, the bus don't run out to any of them. So you're stuck out there, and now you don't have a critical mass to really get a masjid going. Here, if I use California, Oakland, which was rapidly gentrified over the course of the last 15 years. So you have brothers and sisters out in Pittsburgh, but not enough to get a masjid. So they had a few masjids in Oakland, now Pittsburgh, Antioch, Brentwood, Oakley, and then further out into parts of Stockton, Modesto, and you don't have a critical mass to even be visible in those communities anymore.
Create those cultures.
And to create those cultures, or to find ways that we can combat some sort of ways to continue what we had going on. And so it was a lose-lose situation for the people, a losing situation for those brothers and sisters who did remain where you formerly had that big, thriving community, and for all those brothers and sisters who are out in this suburb and that suburb and this ex-burb and this city and a whole nother county where the bus don't run to. And I think that's one thing on the many factors that we just didn't have any response to. 9/11, no response to. And so I think collectively, those are just two of many, many factors that we just didn't see coming, and or if we saw it coming, we didn't think through what's the best response to this situation.
You know, thinking about building community. You know, I remember Hamza and I were classmates at Al-Azhar. And shortly after graduation, Hamza was working as an imam in North Dakota.
South Dakota. Yeah.
South Dakota. We used to call him.
Why not Minot? Why not?
Yeah. We used to call him Mufti at Diyar. He said Mufti at Diyar. I said South Dakota. Then it was Toledo.
Well, it's Toledo first, and then I was in South Dakota.
Okay, it's Toledo, then South Dakota. Now Midtown Mosque and Mi'raj Academy. I said institute earlier, but it's an academy in Memphis. Why and what do you intend? You know, because I remember you calling me, and Hamza's usually pretty staid and controlled, but you were ebullient. You were excited. He said, "Man, we're doing this thing in Memphis. You need to come down here. They selling houses for. You need to get you a couple of men. We building this community." And I said, "Yeah, I will come down there and check it out." And to see how it's grown, these are just signs of tawfiq, manifest signs of tawfiq. So why, and what were you intending, man? What are you intending?
So, you talk about identity. My upbringing as a Black American Muslim was cultivated in an environment that, Imam Zaid Shakir and my parents and others had developed in New Haven, Connecticut, that was embedded in the hood, and transforming environments that were really
Rough to say the least.
yeah, rough, very rough. I mean, so for me, it was that's what I identified with as a Muslim. I didn't because that's all that I really engaged in for the majority of my childhood, and that's the environment I learned Quran in initially. I would walk from my house on Miller Street. This was the mid '90s. To about 6 blocks to the masjid, and every block was a crack house. Every corner had a drug dealer with pit bulls and
Jamaican posse.
I haven't figured out the connection between dope dealers and pit bulls, but there's something there. It's not an incidental connection.
Right.
Well, it's an evolution too, because we went from the German Shepherd to the Doberman Pinscher to the Rottweiler to the pit bull. So it wasn't always the pit bull.
It used to be, before that it was the shepherd.
Oh no, before there's a Rottweiler.
Yeah, so one of the things that I learned going overseas is that you're not just learning information, you're also learning the culture that information comes with. Like it comes with a culture, right? It's kind of housed in a particular culture, a social structure. And that affects how you teach it, right? So when you're teaching it, you're thinking of teaching it in the same mode in which you learned it, right? And so when it comes to the Quran, it was the same thing for me. Like for me, there was a whole experience between going to the house and going to the masjid in which I was accustomed to seeing people see me in a certain way, with the kufi on and maybe my thobe on, I'd still have to walk in the middle of the street because you can't be on, you can't be on the side, you be threatened on the sidewalk if you go past the wrong house.
Unless you got the whole Jamaat and you jumping over the motorcycles on the sidewalk and just daring anybody. So you don't like it, move the motorcycle.
Right.
Boom, boom. And then we have Mustafa.
Yeah, Mustafa, right. Until you get to the block, till you get to the within the 2-block radius of the masjid, then it's good, right? But I did see that people, who were strung out or people who were doing, engaged in different activity would see me as something, as almost like a sign of hope. That there's something there's out of all of this, there's something good still happening here. That's also what I was learning as I was going back and forth to the masjid. So when I went overseas, and I'm thinking, okay, now I've gone from a drug-infested environment to a Muslim environment, so I can expect the exact opposite of what I had, in the States, and in some ways that was true, in other ways it was worse, right? Because the expectations are a little higher. So when I returned, it's nice to be comfortable, to live in a nice neighborhood, to go to masjid in the suburbs and everything. But again, for me, my whole Islamic identity was wrapped around. That's what I identified with. As my identity is what I identify with. Those are the people who I identify with, and that's what I'm energized by. So I was always looking for opportunities to put myself back in a position where I can contribute in a way that other people had contributed for me when I was young, right? Because I know how much value that has. It's like, as I told you in the beginning, you know, I had friends that wanted to have those kind of opportunities, but because we had not intentionally and systematically put those opportunities in place, they just got lost through the cracks. So for me, you know, increasingly, you know, I went to Toledo. I taught at Islamic school there. Went to South Dakota. Yeah. You know, actually, I was the only imam in the state. Yeah, I was only imam.
He's the only.
Yeah, only imam in the state.
Only imam in South Dakota.
Yeah, only imam in South Dakota. So, you know, but I got invaluable experience there, learning about masjid politics and board, you know, dealing with a board and these type of things. But coming to Memphis, Imam Zaid actually called me out of the blue to, you know, look into Memphis. When I came to Memphis, I quickly realized this is the type of environment where we can do some work. This is why I can recognize, you know, I'm familiar with this. And so very quickly, you know, really within 6 months of working at Pleasant View, you know, I was with Malik, our executive director of Midtown Mosque, and, you know, I said, listen, man, you know, I'm used to, you know, feeding people. I'm used to doing, you know, so there's plenty of opportunities. Not like we're like you know, it's a wealthy city. There's plenty of opportunity to do that. And, you know, Memphis is #1 in hunger. I think that year, child hunger especially. So, you know, we started the masjid. In terms of the school, I also realized that you can't just build institutions. You got to build people. You know, institutions are vital to establish. Even the idea of iqamat to salah is an establishment of salah, like as an establishment, like the masjid is an establishment for prayer, right? It's not just an action; it's an institution that, you know, crystallizes particular values and work. But in order for that to be operationalized, you need to develop people who are going to be able to carry on that work. You know, Star Miraj, actually, Hassan Yusuf, you know, was calling me. Yeah.
Our classmate in Yemen.
Yeah, our classmate in Yemen.
Which is, I said I met you in Cairo. I actually met you in Yemen.
Yemen, yeah. Because he ain't say one letter of English for the first whole day I had met him. And I'm speaking English, by the way, the whole time.
Practicing, man.
Yeah, you had to. When you're around other English speakers,
Right.
Only speak Arabic.
Right.
No English, right?
Yeah, you gave it away when I pulled out the Kool-Aid, though. You know, I had a pack of Kool-Aid in my bag, and I was like, because, you know, overseas you don't get these kind of things. So I said,
oh, man, Kool-Aid.
He broke character. You know?
You speak English? I said, yeah, I'm from Chicago.
And do some Kool-Aid.
Oh man, that was hilarious.
Oh man, it's beautiful, man.
I'll do that.
I want to close because we actually have another engagement. But Dr. Jackson, I just wanted to ask, and then Imam Zaid, a question for you. What are you looking forward to now? I mean, you've done so much. You've inspired many. What are you looking forward to now? At this phase in your life, this phase in your scholarship, this phase in your teaching, this phase in your engagement with the Muslim community, what are you looking forward to now?
Well, when you say looking forward to, you can either mean what do I expect or what do I want? I expect that there's going to be a season of discourse and debate about my last book, and we're not going to get into that right now.
Okay. That's next episode.
And how that relates to other issues within our community, both some of which I've dealt with and some of which I've not. So I expect that to be part of what
What's the title of the book?
Islamic secular. You slick, man. You slick, man. Anyway.
But no, honestly, I thought it's the coming last book. like the definitive final word
Nah.
after this.
No, well,
secular.
we'll see.
So
We'll-
my last book and to my most recent book.
oh yes, I see my most recent book.
Yeah.
So I
Hopefully not
expect
the last
I expect to be engaging in further clarification of that for a little
That's
bit.
lot of clarification.
Yeah.
And that'll
So-
suffice you into your 90s.
See, so that's one thing. What I hope, I mean, this is one of the reasons I'm here, to see how, because part of what I've tried to do, even in my scholarship, is, I mean, the interlocutors in my mind are still some of the same people that Hamzah talked about. And so, even when you're dealing with, I mean, for example, I mean, you take the book I wrote, Islam and the Problem of Black Suffering. I mean, on one level, it's all this high theological stuff. On the other level, it's really about some of those same kinds of people. And so, how to make further steps in bridging that scholarship with the realities that really define the lives of the people from the demographic that he talked about, which is the same demographic that I come from, but not stopping there, because I don't think that Islam in America can stop there. So I mean that's another way of saying that what I aspire to do from here, that's still a work in progress. We'll figure it out, inshallah.
Inshallah. Imam Zaid, if I feel just such profound gratitude. And it's interesting that we're sitting here and we would sit in Cairo talking about our indebtedness to you guys. And now to sit on the couch together on a weekend in which Mi'raj Academy graduated Hufaz, it's like, this amazing kind of realization of
That's the miracle we've been talking about, man.
that's the miracle that we've been talking about. This is mu'jiza. Imam Zaid, if you could leave our community with just a final message today, because you're still kicking. Ain't no final. There's no signing off. Inshallah, Talallahu umrak, inshallah. No signing off yet, but I just want you to based on what you've seen this weekend, what we experienced yesterday, maybe some of what we experienced last night at dinner, maybe some of what we're going to be talking about today, this evening. Yeah, a lot happens in Memphis, man. Y'all got to come down. You see what I'm saying? What do you feel inspired by in this particular moment?
I think the power of love. A lot of times people with cliche-ish, oh man, that's Christian. That's the heart of this affair. لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. Till you love for your brother what you love for yourself. مثل المؤمنين في تودهم وترحمهم تعاطفهم مثل الجسد. In the likeness of the believers in their mutual love, their love for each other, mutual mercy, the emotional bonds that bind them. So, love is all throughout this endeavor. And when you see it manifested, there was a lot of love there yesterday.
Allahu Akbar.
When you see that love manifested and you see it bringing people together, there are people from D.C., from Philly, from Dallas, from here, Chicago. When you see it manifested, it creates a new realm for hope. Because love is not an easily quantifiable. The thing is difficult to quantify it. It's a quality. And I think a lot of times some people's sense of hopelessness comes from the lack of those things they can quantify. But if they look at those things that are qualities, then they'll find a whole nother realm that can inspire them and uplift them and give them the wind in their sails to keep it moving. Allahu Akbar.
This was, mashallah, a great honor, a great privilege to be in the presence of people that I admire profoundly and people from whom I've benefited tremendously. I was telling my wife the other day, I said, Dr. Jackson will never understand what he means to me. He'll never. الوصف لا يبلغ كنهها. That's what we say in Arabic. You know, the description doesn't, he'll never understand what he means to me. And Imam Zaid will never understand what he means to me. Hamzah Abdul-Malik, he all right. 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 No, and he'll never know he'll never know what he means to me. So to have a conversation, this was just a beautiful way to spend an hour on a Sunday. And I hope that we can do it again. That was Tell Me a Story. If you want to tell me a story, please reach out to us at
Tell Me a Story Media.
Tell Me a Story Media
at Gmail.
at gmail.com. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wow.